The crystal chandeliers of the Imperial Seoul Hotel cast fractured light across the private dining room, where Korea's most powerful men gathered. At the head of the obsidian table sat Seo-jun, his dragon and tiger tattoo coiling up his neck like a living threat. When the Nigerian waitress approached with trembling hands to refill his glass, she accidentally brushed his sleeve. The room fell silent. "You are just Waitress," he said, his voice colder than winter steel. "Know your place." Laughter erupted from 18 powerful men. But Chioma Okonkwo did not flinch. She did not apologize. She simply looked at him, really looked at him, with eyes that held secrets darker than his own. And in that moment, Seo-jun noticed something that made his blood run cold. He recognized something in her gaze that he'd only ever seen in mirrors. The eyes of someone who had lost everything. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, tell us your city and country in the comments. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. Please like, share, and subscribe. Now, let me tell you how a single moment of cruelty became the beginning of an obsession that would shake the foundations of two worlds. 3 hours before the humiliation that would change everything, Chioma Okonkwo stood before the cracked mirror in the staff changing room of the Imperial Seoul Hotel. Her fingers worked methodically, pinning her braids into the severe bun required by management. Each pin was a small surrender. Each adjustment, a reminder of how far she had fallen. Once, servants had styled her hair. Once, she had worn gowns that cost more than this hotel's monthly revenue. Once, she had been Chioma Adize Okonkwo, eldest daughter of Chief Emmanuel Okonkwo, the Lion of Lagos, whose shipping empire stretched across 3 continents, and whose influence made presidents nervous. Now she was employee number 847, a waitress. Invisible. Chioma. Her supervisor's sharp voice cut through the humid room. "The private booking for the Zenith Group, you're assigned. Don't mess this up. These are the most important clients we've ever hosted." Chioma nodded, her expression perfectly neutral. She had learned neutrality the way soldiers learn to breathe under fire, through necessity, through pain, through the absolute requirement of survival. The Zenith Group. Even in the cramped staff quarters of a Seoul hotel, that name carried weight. Everyone knew that Zenith Holdings was merely the legitimate face of something far darker. Everyone knew that its chairman, a man known only in whispers as the Silent King, controlled half of Seoul's underground economy. What no one knew was that Chioma had spent 3 years preparing for this exact moment. Not to serve these men, to study them. She smoothed the black uniform over her hips, checked that her name tag was straight, and walked toward the private elevator that would take her to the 37th floor. Her heart should have been pounding. It wasn't. The woman who could feel fear had died 3 years ago in a Lagos mansion, surrounded by the bodies of everyone she loved. The private dining room of the Imperial Seoul Hotel was a masterpiece of understated Korean elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seoul's glittering skyline. The table, a single slab of black marble imported from Italy, could seat 20, but had been set for 19. 18 men sat in positions that spoke volumes about hierarchy. The 19th chair, the one at the head of the table, remained empty. Chioma moved through the room like water, invisible and essential. She poured wine without spilling a drop. She anticipated empty glasses before they were raised. She kept her eyes down, her movements small, her presence forgettable. But she was listening. God, she was listening. The Busan shipment needs to clear customs by Thursday. Park is becoming a problem, perhaps a permanent solution. The Nigerian contract fell through. Those African politicians want too much. Chioma's hand trembled slightly at the word Nigerian. She steadied herself. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of learning Korean until she dreamed in it. 3 years of working her way into this exact position. She would not fail now. The conversations continued, a symphony of corruption and power that would have made international prosecutors weep with frustrated longing. These men discussed human trafficking with the same casual tone they used for stock prices. They debated political assassinations between bites of imported Wagyu beef. And through it all, that 19th chair remained empty. Until it didn't. Chioma felt him before she saw him. The room's energy shifted like the air before a thunderstorm. Charged, dangerous, electric. Conversations died mid-sentence. 18 powerful men straightened in their chairs like schoolboys caught misbehaving. Footsteps. Measured. Deliberate. Each one a statement of absolute dominance. Chioma kept her eyes on the wine bottle in her hands, but her peripheral vision caught the figure moving toward the head of the table. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit so perfectly tailored it might as well have been painted onto his frame. And there, crawling up from his collar like a living thing, the edge of a tattoo. Dragon and tiger, intertwined in an eternal dance of power and ferocity. She had studied photographs of this man. She had memorized the planes of his face, the cold calculation in his eyes, the way he held his shoulders, like someone perpetually ready for violence. But photographs hadn't prepared her for the reality of Park Seo-joon. He didn't sit in his chair. He claimed it. The way a king claims a throne. The way a predator claims territory. Gentlemen. His voice was low, controlled, not loud enough to echo, but somehow filling every corner of the room. I trust the evening has been productive. A chorus of agreements. Nervous laughter. The shuffling of papers and the clearing of throats. Chioma moved forward to fill the water glass that had been placed before his seat. Standard protocol. Invisible service. Nothing she hadn't done 1,000 times before. But as she poured, her sleeve, that damned standard issue uniform sleeve that was slightly too long, brushed against his forearm. The contact lasted less than a second. An eternity. Time fractured. Seo-joon's head turned slowly, the way a predator tracks movement in tall grass. His eyes, cold, dark, utterly devoid of warmth, found her face. And stayed there. Chioma completed the pour with hands that remained steady through sheer force of will. She stepped back, preparing to retreat to her position by the wall. Stop. One word. The room held its breath. Chioma stopped. Look at me. She raised her eyes. It was a mistake. She knew it was a mistake the moment their gazes locked. Because Seo-joon's eyes weren't just cold, they were analytical, calculating. The eyes of a man who had built an empire by reading people the way scholars read ancient texts. And right now, those eyes were reading her. You touched me, he said. The words fell into the silence, like stones into still water. I apologize, sir. Chioma's Korean was flawless, soul-accented, formal, perfectly pitched. It was unintentional. Something flickered in his gaze. Interest? Suspicion? Both. Your Korean is excellent. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. A data point being filed away for future analysis. Thank you, sir. Where did you learn? The question was casual. The attention behind it was anything but. 18 powerful men watched this exchange, with varying degrees of confusion and amusement. Who was this African waitress that had captured their chairman's attention, even for a moment? I studied at a language institute, sir. Which one? The Seoul National Language Academy. A lie. She had learned Korean from a private tutor hired by her father, back when learning Asian languages had been part of her preparation to take over the family's international shipping business. Back when she had been groomed to negotiate with the very men who now sat at this table. Seo-joon's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. He knew she was lying. He couldn't prove it. But he knew. Your name? Chioma, sir. Chioma. He rolled the syllables across his tongue like he was tasting them. Nigerian. Yes, sir. One of the men at the table, a heavy-set individual with the soft hands of someone who had never done manual labor, laughed. Chairman Park, surely you're not interested in the help? She's just a waitress. The words hung in the air. Just a waitress. Seo-joon's gaze remained fixed on Chioma's face for 3 more heartbeats. Then he turned away, dismissing her as completely as if she had never existed. Continue, he said to the room. Chioma retreated to her position by the wall. Her face remained neutral. Inside, she was screaming. The dinner continued for 2 more hours. Chioma served. She poured. She cleared plates. She did everything required of employee number 847, and she did it flawlessly. But she felt his awareness. Every time she moved through his peripheral vision, She felt Seo Jun's attention track her like a radar following an aircraft. He never looked at her directly. He never acknowledged her existence again. But he was watching, learning, cataloging. At 11:47 p.m., as she refilled water glasses for the third time, the heavy-set man who had called her just a waitress grabbed her wrist. "Hey, African girl." His Korean was slurred. Too much wine, too much power, too much certainty that there would be no consequences. "Yes, sir?" Chioma kept her voice level. "I've always been curious about African women." His smile was wet and predatory. "They say you people have natural rhythm. Is that true?" Snickers from several men around the table. Chioma felt the old rage rise up in her chest. The same rage that had kept her alive through 3 years of hell. The same rage that had driven her to learn, to plan, to position herself exactly where she stood now. She crushed it down. "Not yet. Not here. Not for this insignificant creature." "I'm afraid I wouldn't know, sir," she said, her voice perfectly blank. "I've never had the opportunity to study the matter academically." Someone laughed. The heavy-set man's face darkened. "Are you mocking me?" "No, sir. I would never." "I think you are." He stood, still gripping her wrist. "I think this African bitch needs to learn respect for her betters." The room went quiet. At the head of the table, Seo Jun continued eating his dessert as if nothing unusual was happening. His knife cut through chocolate torte with surgical precision. His expression remained absolutely neutral, but his free hand, the one resting on the table, had curled into a fist, and the dragon tattoo on his wrist seemed to pulse with barely contained violence. "Director Kim." Seo Jun's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. He didn't look up from his plate. "Release her." The heavy-set man, Director Kim, froze. "Chairman Park, I said release her." No raised voice. No visible anger. Just absolute, unchallengeable authority. Director Kim's hand opened as if burned. Chioma stepped back smoothly, rubbing her wrist without drawing attention to the gesture. "Thank you, sir," she said to Seo Jun. He finally looked up. Their eyes met. And in that moment, something shifted. Later, Chioma would replay this exchange 1,000 times, trying to understand exactly what changed, trying to identify the precise second when she stopped being invisible and became something else entirely. She never found it, but Seo Jun did, because in that moment of unexpected gratitude, Chioma Okonkwo let her mask slip, just for an instant, just long enough for him to glimpse the woman beneath the uniform. And what he saw there, the intelligence, the education, the aristocratic bearing that no amount of poverty could completely erase, made something cold and dormant in his chest wake up and take notice. "You're welcome," he said. Then, almost as an afterthought, as if the words were leaving his mouth without his permission, "You are just Waitress. Know your place." The cruelty was deliberate, calculated, a test, and Chioma failed it, because instead of flinching, instead of apologizing, instead of doing any of the things a simple waitress would do, she smiled. A small smile. A dangerous smile. The smile of a woman who had faced far worse monsters than Park Seo Jun and survived. "Of course, sir," she said. "I know exactly what I am." Then she turned and walked away. And Seo Jun, the Silent King, the most feared man in South Korea, the master of shadows and silence, found himself staring after a waitress like a man who had just seen something impossible. Something that would haunt him. Something that would destroy him. Something that would save him. Seo Jun didn't sleep that night. This was not unusual. The leader of South Korea's most powerful criminal organization had learned long ago that sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. Too many enemies. Too many moving pieces. Too many people who would benefit from finding him vulnerable. But tonight, his wakefulness had nothing to do with business. Tonight, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Just a waitress. He stood at the window of his penthouse, 47 floors above the sleeping city. Seoul sprawled beneath him like a circuit board of light and shadow. His kingdom, his battlefield, his prison. Behind him, his reflection ghosted across the glass. The dragon and tiger tattoo on his neck seemed to writhe in the dim light, a permanent reminder of the vows he had made at 16. The vows that had shaped him, defined him, trapped him. Power, control, never weakness, never attachment, never love. And yet, he could still see her eyes. Dark and warm, yes, but with something else beneath the surface. Something that didn't belong to a woman who refilled water glasses for a living. Recognition. That was what had shaken him. When she had looked at him, she hadn't seen the chairman of Zenith Holdings. She hadn't seen the silent king. She hadn't seen the monster that made grown men weep and beg. She had seen something else, and she hadn't been afraid. Seo Jun's hand rose unconsciously to his collar, fingers brushing the edge of his tattoo. The dragon represented his father's legacy, the empire of blood and money that had been thrust upon him when he was barely a man. The tiger represented his mother, dead when he was 12, her memory wrapped in barbed wire and buried so deep he could pretend it didn't exist. Together, the dragon and tiger symbolized everything he had become, everything he had sacrificed, everything he could never escape. "Sir." His assistant's voice came through the intercom, professional despite the late hour. "What is it, Secretary Han?" "The background check you requested is complete." Seo Jun's reflection smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Bring it." 2 minutes later, Secretary Han, a man in his 50s who had served the Park family for 3 decades, entered the penthouse with a folder that seemed too thin for its significance. "There's not much, sir," he said, placing the folder on the desk. "Employee records from a hotel. Previous employment at 3 other establishments, all service industry. Immigration records show she entered Korea on a student visa 4 years ago, converted to a work visa 2 years later. Language Institute enrollment records. Rental history. Nothing remarkable." "Nothing remarkable," Seo Jun repeated. "No, sir. And yet you're standing there with that expression on your face, Secretary Han. The one you wear when you want to tell me something but fear how I'll react." Secretary Han had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Sir, it's probably nothing. Let me decide what's nothing." A pause. "Then, her records are too clean, sir." Seo Jun turned from the window, his full attention now focused on his assistant. "Explain." "A Nigerian woman arrives in South Korea 4 years ago. No family connections. No established support network. Yet she navigates immigration bureaucracy flawlessly, maintains perfect employment records, learns Korean well enough to pass for a native speaker, all while working minimum wage jobs that should barely cover her rent." Secretary Han shifted his weight. "I've seen refugees, sir. I've seen immigrants. I've seen people who truly start from nothing. They struggle. They make mistakes. They leave traces of desperation. This woman." He gestured at the thin folder. "It's like she appeared fully formed. Like someone created a perfect paper trail for her to follow." "You think her identity is fabricated?" "I think her current identity is flawless, which means either she has help from professionals, or she is a professional." Seo Jun picked up the folder and flipped it open. Inside, a single photograph stared back at him, taken from the hotel's employee records, clearly a standard ID photo with harsh lighting and unflattering angles. Even in that terrible photograph, she was striking. Not beautiful in the conventional sense. Not the manufactured perfection of the women who threw themselves at him at every gala and business event. But striking, compelling. The kind of face that made you want to look closer, to understand the story written in the lines around her eyes and the set of her jaw. "Find out who she really is," Seo Jun said. "Sir, I want to know everything. Where she came from. Why she's here. What she's hiding." He closed the folder with a soft snap. "Use our people in Nigeria if necessary. Money is no object." "May I ask why this woman has captured your attention, sir?" "She's just." "Do not finish that sentence." Secretary Han bowed. "Of course, sir. I apologize." After his assistant left, Seo Jun stood alone in the darkness of his penthouse, holding a photograph of a woman who shouldn't matter. A waitress. Nobody. Invisible. And yet, as he traced the line of her jaw with his thumb, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at something far more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. Something that could destroy him. Something he wanted anyway. Chioma's apartment was the size of Seo-jun's closet. One room. Shared bathroom down the hall. A window that looked out onto a brick wall. Rent that consumed nearly half her meager salary. Home. She sat on her narrow bed as the sun rose over Seoul, still wearing her work uniform, her body exhausted, but her mind racing. You are just a waitress. Know your place. She should be angry. She was angry. But beneath the anger, there was something else. Recognition. Because when she had looked into Park Seo-jun's eyes, she had seen something familiar. The same emptiness that stared back at her from mirrors. The same performance of humanity that she had perfected over 3 years of hiding. He was playing a role, just like she was. The thought was simultaneously comforting and terrifying. She reached beneath her mattress and extracted a worn leather journal, the only thing she had managed to save from her previous life. The cover was burned at one corner, scarred by the same fire that had consumed everything else. Inside, pressed between pages of her father's handwriting, was a single photograph. Her family, before. Her father, Chief Emmanuel Okonkwo, stood at the center, a mountain of a man with a smile that could light up stadiums. Her mother, Adiz, elegant and poised, wearing the traditional coral beads that marked her as a chief's wife. Her younger brother, Emeka, 17, and already showing their father's brilliance. And Chioma herself, 24 and glowing with the arrogance of someone who had never known hardship. They had been photographed at the opening of her father's new shipping terminal in Lagos, one of the largest privately owned port facilities in West Africa. 6 months later, they were all dead, except her. Chioma closed the journal before the memories could drag her under. She had learned, painfully, that grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. Every moment spent mourning was a moment her enemies gained ground. And she had enemies. Powerful enemies. The kind of enemies who could orchestrate the assassination of one of Nigeria's most protected men and make it look like an accident. The kind of enemies who had connections everywhere, including, perhaps, at a certain Seoul hotel that hosted meetings of the Zenith Group. Chioma hadn't come to Korea by chance. She hadn't taken a job at the Imperial Seoul Hotel because she needed the money. She was hunting. And tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she had finally caught the scent of her prey. The next morning brought gray skies and the kind of cold that Seoul specialized in, the kind that seeped through inadequate coats and settled into bones. Chioma arrived at the hotel at 6:47 a.m., precisely 13 minutes before her shift was scheduled to begin. Early, but not suspiciously so. Punctual, but not obsessive. The perfect employee. The invisible worker. Okonkwo. She turned to find her supervisor approaching with an expression that hovered somewhere between nervousness and excitement. You've been reassigned. I'm sorry. Starting today, you're being transferred to the executive service team. 37th floor and above only. Chioma felt the first stirring of alarm. May I ask why? Request came from the top. Way above my pay grade. The supervisor shrugged. You must have impressed someone important last night. Congratulations. Your new position comes with a significant pay increase and access to areas of the hotel that most employees never see. A promotion. A significant one. The kind of promotion that didn't happen to invisible waitresses who had worked at the hotel for less than a year. He's investigating me, Chioma realized with cold clarity. Park Seo-jun hadn't dismissed her after last night's incident. He hadn't forgotten about the African waitress who had failed to cower when he expected cowering. He had become interested. And for a man like Seo-jun, interest was the most dangerous thing in the world. Because men like him didn't just investigate. They possessed. They consumed. They destroyed. Chioma accepted the promotion with appropriate gratitude and followed her supervisor to her new assignment. Her face remained pleasant and professional. Inside, she was recalculating every plan she had ever made. The hunter had become the hunted. And the game had just changed entirely. The 37th floor of the Imperial Seoul Hotel was a different world, where the lower floors catered to wealthy tourists and business travelers. This level served only the truly elite, the kind of guests whose names appeared in history books and whose whims could collapse economies. Chioma spent her first week learning the subtle hierarchies of this new environment. Which guests required absolute silence, which preferred pleasant conversation, which would tip generously, and which would complain to management if their water was 2 degrees too warm. But mostly, she spent the week being watched. She felt the surveillance everywhere. Cameras that seemed to follow her movements, staff members who appeared at convenient moments, questions disguised as casual conversation. Where did you say you were from again? Your English is so elegant. Did you study abroad? Such unusual earrings. Are they traditional? Chioma answered each question with practiced vagueness, revealing nothing while appearing to reveal everything. It was an art she had learned at her mother's knee, back when navigation of Lego society had required the same skills as espionage. By the end of the week, she had identified at least 3 staff members who were reporting directly to someone. She didn't need to guess who that someone was. On Friday evening, exactly 1 week after the dinner that had changed everything, she was assigned to serve a private meeting in the Pearl Suite. When she saw the guest list, her blood ran cold. CO June. Alone. No business associates. No political allies. No one to witness whatever was about to happen. Just her and the most dangerous man in South Korea. Chioma prepared the tea service with hands that refused to shake. She had faced worse odds. She had survived worse situations. She had watched her entire family die in a single night. This was nothing. This was just a meeting. This was just a monster in a suit. She knocked on the door at precisely 7 p.m. Enter. The Pearl Suite was designed for intimate gatherings, cream-colored walls, subtle lighting. A seating area arranged around a low table that encouraged close conversation. The city sparkled through floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul spreading out like a carpet of lights. CO June sat in a leather armchair, jacket removed, shirt collar open just enough to reveal the full expanse of his tattoo. The dragon and tiger seemed to breathe in the soft light. He was reading a file. Her file, she realized. Close the door behind you, he said without looking up. Chioma obeyed, then moved to the table to arrange the tea service. Every movement was precise, professional, utterly correct. I've been reading about you, Chioma Okonkwo. She set down the teapot. I'm flattered, sir. You shouldn't be. He finally looked up, and something in his gaze made her instinct scream. Your records are fascinating. Perfect attendance at your language institute. Excellent employment reviews at every position. No negative marks of any kind. In 3 years in this country, you have apparently never made a single mistake. I try to be diligent, sir. You try to be invisible. He set down the file and leaned forward, elbows on knees. Tell me, Chioma, what is a woman who speaks Korean like she was born to it, who holds herself like she grew up in palaces, who shows absolutely no fear when confronted by men who make politicians beg for mercy? What is a woman like that doing serving tea in a Seoul hotel? The question hung in the air between them. Chioma could lie. She was good at lying. 3 years of lying had kept her alive. But as she looked at CO June, really looked at him for the first time since that fateful dinner, she recognized something in his eyes that stopped the automatic deception. He wasn't just curious. He was hungry. Starving for something he probably couldn't even name. Truth, perhaps. Connection. Something real in a life built entirely on pretense. We are the same, she thought. Both hiding. Both pretending. Both desperately, terrifyingly alone. I'm doing what I need to survive, she said simply. Just like everyone else. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have to give. He stood in one fluid motion, a predator rising from rest. He was taller than she remembered, or perhaps the private setting simply made his presence more overwhelming. He moved toward her, and Chioma had to fight every instinct to step back. She held her ground. If she ran, he would chase. She understood men like him. Power was everything. Dominance was currency. If she showed weakness, she would become something to be conquered. CO June stopped a foot away from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive, with undertones of sandalwood and smoke. Close enough that she could see the faint scar beneath his left eye, the slight tension around his mouth, The exhaustion he hid beneath layers of control. "You intrigue me," he said softly. "I don't like being intrigued." "Then stop looking into my background." "I can't." The admission surprised them both. Something flickered across his face. Confusion, perhaps, or something deeper. He wasn't used to being unable to control his own actions. He wasn't used to wanting something he couldn't simply take. "What happened to you?" he asked. The question was so unexpected, so raw, that Chioma felt her carefully constructed walls tremble. "What happened to make you like this?" "Like what?" "Unafraid. Empty. Looking at the world like everything in it has already burned." For a moment, just a moment, Chioma considered telling him the truth. About the fire. About the betrayal. About the men she had loved and trusted who had sold her family to their enemies for profit and power. About the 3 years she had spent as a ghost, moving through the world without existing, gathering information and building contacts, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But the moment passed. "We all carry our own fires, sir," she said instead. "Some of us are just better at hiding the burns." Seo Jun's hand rose, and for a heartbeat, she thought he was going to touch her face. He didn't. His fingers stopped an inch from her cheek, trembling slightly with restrained want. "I'm going to find out who you really are," he said. "I know. And when I do, everything will change." "I know that too." They stood there, suspended between whatever they had been and whatever they might become. The city glittered below them, oblivious to the war being waged in the silence of a hotel suite. Finally, Seo Jun stepped back. "Leave," he said, his voice rough. "Before I do something we'll both regret." Chioma turned and walked toward the door. She was 3 steps away when his voice stopped her. "Chioma." She didn't turn around. "Yes, sir?" "Next time, don't be afraid to show me the fire." She left without responding. But as she walked down the corridor toward the service elevator, she allowed herself a small, dangerous smile. "If you want to see the fire, park Seo Jun," she thought. "Then be careful what you wish for. Because when I burn everything around me." 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of surveillance. 2 weeks of private meetings that never quite crossed the line. 2 weeks of growing obsession on both sides. Chioma told herself she was still in control. She was gathering information. She was using her access to the 37th floor to learn about Zenith Holdings' operations, to identify the players, to map the power structures. She was definitely not spending her nights thinking about the way Seo Jun's eyes darkened when she entered a room. She was definitely not replaying every conversation, searching for meaning in the spaces between words. She was definitely not falling. And then Young-woo appeared. Lee Young-woo was everything Seo Jun was not. Where Seo Jun was cold, Young-woo radiated warmth. Where Seo Jun commanded through silence, Young-woo charmed through conversation. Where Seo Jun made people fear him, Young-woo made them want to please him. He was a legitimate businessman, CEO of a tech company that had revolutionized mobile payments across Asia. Young for his position, wealthy beyond measure, genuinely kind in a way that seemed almost impossible in the circles he moved in. And he was absolutely, obviously, persistently interested in Chioma. "You're wasted in this job," he told her during his 3rd visit to the hotel, as she served him coffee in the executive lounge. "Someone with your intelligence, your presence, you should be running companies, not serving coffee to the people who do." Chioma smiled professionally. "I'm content with my position, Mr. Lee." "Young-woo, please. Mr. Lee is my father." His smile was boyish and genuine. "And I don't believe you. Content women don't have the kind of hunger in their eyes that you do." Something about his directness was refreshing. Something about his attention was dangerous. "I'm curious," Chioma said, setting down his coffee. "Why do you keep requesting me specifically for your service? There are many excellent staff members on this floor." "Because you're the only one who doesn't treat me like either a mark to be exploited or a prize to be won." He leaned back in his chair. "You treat me like a human being. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" "I imagine it's very lonely." "It is." The honesty caught her off guard. She found herself sitting down across from him, a breach of protocol that could get her fired, but suddenly she didn't care. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you understand loneliness." His eyes met hers with disconcerting directness. I think you understand what it means to move through a world where no one really sees you, where everyone wants something from you, but no one wants you. Chioma felt her throat tighten. For 3 years, she had been invisible. For 3 years, she had been a ghost. And here was this man, this kind, wealthy, powerful man, offering to see her. I don't even know who you really are, Young-woo continued. And honestly, I don't care. Whatever you're hiding, whatever brought you to Korea, whatever makes you walk through life like you're preparing for war, it doesn't matter to me. I just want to know you. The real you. Whoever that is. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. It was also incredibly naive. Because the real Chioma Okonkwo was not a tragic waif waiting to be rescued. She was a hunter tracking prey through the corridors of power. She was a woman planning the destruction of everyone responsible for her family's murder. She was dangerous. But as she looked at Young-woo's open, hopeful face, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. The possibility of something different. The chance to be someone other than the vengeful ghost she had become. Have dinner with me, Young-woo said. Tomorrow night. Not here. Somewhere normal. Somewhere we can talk like regular people. I can't. Why not? Because Seo-jun was watching. Because getting involved with anyone would complicate everything. Because she didn't deserve kindness. Because if she let herself feel something, she might lose the cold focus that had kept her alive. It's complicated, she said. Life is complicated. Young-woo reached across the table and touched her hand. Just briefly, just lightly, but the contact sent an electric shock through her system. That's not a reason to hide from it. Chioma pulled her hand back. I should get back to work. Think about it. That's all I ask. She stood and walked away without responding. But she did think about it. For the rest of the day, she thought about nothing else. And she wasn't the only one. Seo-jun watched the security footage 3 times. Young-woo touching Chioma's hand. Chioma's slight, almost imperceptible lean toward his warmth. The smile that crossed her face, a real smile, not the professional mask she wore for everyone else. The smile she had never given him. Something dark and ugly coiled in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in decades. Jealousy. He should be above such petty emotions. He was the silent king. He controlled billions of dollars and thousands of lives. He had women throwing themselves at him every day. Beautiful women, powerful women. Women who would do anything for a moment of his attention. He should not care that a waitress, just a waitress, had smiled at another man. But he did. God help him, he did. Find out everything about Lee Young-woo, he told Secretary Han. Business dealings. Personal life. Weaknesses. Sir, Lee Young-woo is a legitimate businessman with no criminal connections. Investigating him might. I didn't ask for your opinion. I asked for information. Secretary Han bowed and retreated. Seo-jun returned to the footage. He watched it again, and again, and again. 3 days later, an envelope appeared in Chioma's locker at work. No stamp. No return address. Just her name, written in elegant calligraphy. Inside was a single card. The Orchid Gala tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. Imperial Seoul Hotel. Grand ballroom, your attendance is expected. No signature. None needed. Chioma stared at the invitation, her mind racing. The Orchid Gala was one of Seoul's most exclusive social events, a gathering of politicians, executives, celebrities, and power brokers. Entry was by invitation only. The guest list was vetted by multiple security agencies. And somehow, an invitation had appeared in the locker of a waitress. This was either a trap or a test. Possibly both. She should refuse. She should claim illness, avoid the ballroom, maintain her cover as an insignificant service worker. But the invitation represented something she hadn't had in 3 years. Access. The people she was hunting, the architects of her family's destruction, they moved in these circles. They attended these galas. They smiled and shook hands and pretended to be respectable members of society. If she could get into that room, Chioma tucked the invitation into her pocket and made her decision. She would walk into the lion's den. And this time, she wouldn't be wearing a server's uniform. Finding a gown was the first challenge. Chioma's salary barely covered rent and food. A designer dress appropriate for the Orchid Gala would cost more than she earned in 6 months. But Chioma had learned long ago that money was not the only currency that mattered. She called in favors from 3 years of careful networking. The seamstress she had helped when immigration threatened deportation. The boutique owner whose daughter she had tutored in English. The makeup artist she had befriended during a catering event. By the following evening, she had everything she needed. The dress was simple, black silk that fell in clean lines from shoulder to floor, elegant without being ostentatious. It had been made 40 years ago for a Nigerian diplomat's wife, tucked away in a vintage shop until Chioma found it and had it altered to fit her frame. Her mother's coral beads, the only jewelry she still possessed, hung around her neck like a blessing and a curse. Her hair was styled in elaborate bantu knots, a silent declaration of identity that she had hidden for 3 years. As Chioma stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her apartment, she barely recognized herself. For the first time since the fire, she looked like Chief Emmanuel Okonkwo's daughter. For the first time in 3 years, she looked like who she really was. And that, she knew, was the most dangerous thing of all. The grand ballroom of the Imperial Seoul Hotel had been transformed into an orchid garden. Thousands of flowers cascaded from the ceiling. Their scent perfumed the air, sweet and intoxicating. The lighting was golden and soft, designed to make everyone look beautiful, to mask imperfections and smooth away age. Chioma entered through the main doors at 8:17 p.m., late enough to draw attention, early enough to seem accidental. She felt the stares immediately. In this sea of Korean faces, she stood out like a single dark orchid among pale blooms. The whispers started before she had taken 3 steps into the room. Who is she? Is she a model? I've never seen her before. Those beads, is that traditional African jewelry? Chioma moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who had been trained from birth to navigate hostile social waters. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. She smiled politely at curious faces. She deflected questions with practiced vagueness. And, all the while, she was scanning the room, looking for him, looking for them, the men who had killed her family. Chioma. The voice came from behind her. She turned to find Young-woo standing there, looking unfairly handsome in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. "You came," he said, his smile bright enough to light the room. "I was hoping you would. You sent the invitation? I suggested to the organizing committee that they might want to include you on the guest list." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "You look absolutely stunning, by the way. Not that you don't always look stunning, but tonight..." He shook his head. "Tonight you look like a queen." Chioma's heart warmed despite herself. "Thank you, Young-woo. Dance with me." "I shouldn't." "One dance. That's all I ask. Just one dance. And then I'll leave you alone for the rest of the evening. I promise." There were a dozen reasons to refuse. There was one reason to accept. She wanted to feel normal. Just for one dance. Just for one moment. One dance, she agreed. Young-woo's smile could have powered Seoul for a month. He led her onto the dance floor, one hand resting properly at her waist, the other holding her fingers with careful respect. The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic, a waltz, she thought, though the specifics of Western ballroom dancing had never been her strength. "You dance like you were born to it," Young-woo said. "My mother insisted on lessons." "She sounds like a wise woman." She was. Chioma caught herself. "She passed away." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She lived well. She was loved." They danced in comfortable silence for a few moments. Chioma found herself relaxing into Young-woo's careful guidance. He was a good dancer, confident but not showy, leading without pushing. It was nice. It was simple. It was completely, utterly wrong. Because across the ballroom, standing in a circle of powerful men, Park So-joon was watching her with eyes that burned like dying stars. Chioma felt his gaze like a physical touch, like hands around her throat, like fire against her skin. His jaw was tight. His posture was rigid. The dragon tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with barely contained fury. He was jealous. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, Something dark and dangerous purred in her chest. Good, she thought. Let him burn. Let him understand what it feels like to want something he can't have. If you were Chioma, would you forgive Seo Jun for publicly humiliating you? Tell us in the comments below. The dance ended. Young-woo escorted Chioma from the floor with the careful attention of a man handling something precious. Thank you, he said. That was Lee Young-woo. The voice that cut through the room was soft, but carried like thunder. Both Chioma and Young-woo turned to find Seo Jun approaching. His stride was measured, controlled, but something in his eyes had slipped past the usual walls. Something raw, something feral. Chairman Park. Young-woo's tone was carefully neutral. I didn't expect to see you on the dance floor tonight. I wasn't on the dance floor. I was watching. Seo Jun's eyes flickered to Chioma, then back to Young-woo. You seem to have found a new dance partner. Miss Okonkwo was kind enough to accept my invitation for a single dance. Miss Okonkwo. Seo Jun finally allowed his gaze to rest fully on her, and the impact was almost physical. You look different tonight. I'm not wearing a uniform. No, you're not. His eyes traveled slowly down her body, not lewdly, but with the careful attention of someone memorizing every detail. You look like someone else entirely. Perhaps I am. Perhaps. Young-woo stepped slightly in front of Chioma, a protective gesture that was either very brave or very stupid. If you'll excuse us, Chairman Park, I promised Miss Okonkwo I would introduce her to some friends. I'm afraid that we'll have to wait. Seo Jun's smile was a cold thing, all teeth and no warmth. Miss Okonkwo owes me a dance. I wasn't aware she owed you anything. Weren't you? Seo Jun tilted his head, a predator assessing prey. Perhaps you should be. Perhaps you should learn exactly who you're attempting to court before you make promises you can't keep. The threat was barely veiled. Young-woo stiffened. Are you threatening me, Chairman Park? I never threaten. I simply state facts. Seo Jun extended his hand toward Chioma. One dance. That's all I ask. The mockery was deliberate, throwing Young-woo's own words back in his face. Chioma looked between the two men. One offered warmth and safety and the possibility of a normal life. The other offered danger and obsession and answers to questions she had been asking for 3 years. It wasn't really a choice. One dance, she said, and placed her hand in Seo Jun's. His fingers closed around hers like a trap. Dancing with Seo Jun was nothing like dancing with Young-woo. Where Young-woo had guided with careful respect, Seo Jun commanded. His hand at her waist wasn't asking permission. It was claiming territory. His movements were precise and controlled, but beneath the control, she could feel something barely leashed. Fury, desire, possession. You accepted his invitation, Seo Jun said. His voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. Not mine. You didn't send an invitation. I sent your promotion. I sent access. I sent opportunities. Those were tests, not invitations. Everything is a test. His grip tightened slightly. And you keep passing in ways I don't expect. They moved through the dance in silence for a moment. Around them, other couples gave them a wide berth, whether from respect for Seo Jun's position or fear of his intensity. Chioma couldn't tell. Who are you? He finally asked. The question was raw, desperate. Nothing like the controlled man she had encountered before. I told you. I'm just a waitress. Lies. He spun her, pulled her close enough that their bodies nearly touched. A waitress doesn't move through a room like this. A waitress doesn't wear traditional Nigerian jewelry that's probably older than this hotel. A waitress doesn't make legitimate tech CEOs trail after her like love-struck teenagers. Chioma felt her heartbeat quicken. Jealous, Chairman Park? Violently. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. I don't share. You don't have anything to share. I'm not yours. Yet, the single word hung between them like a promise, like a threat, like fate. What makes you think I would ever belong to you? Chioma asked. You called me just a waitress in front of your associates. You humiliated me publicly. You've spent weeks investigating my background like I'm a criminal. Why would I ever want anything to do with you? Seo Jun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its sharp edges. "Because you see me." The words were so unexpected that Chioma missed a step. Seo Jun steadied her automatically, his hand pressing more firmly against her back. "Everyone else sees the silent king," he continued. "They see power. They see money. They see fear. But you looked at me that first night, and you saw something else. I don't know what. I don't know how. But you saw something that no one else has seen in decades." "And what do you think I saw?" He met her eyes directly. "Someone as broken as yourself." Chioma felt her walls crack. Just slightly. Just enough to let the pain through. "I should hate you," she said. "You should. You represent everything I despise. Power without conscience. Wealth without ethics. Control without compassion." "I know. So why?" She swallowed. "Why can't I stop thinking about you?" Seo Jun's breath caught. For a moment, just a moment, the mask slipped entirely. And beneath the cold exterior, beneath the calculated control, Chioma glimpsed something that made her breath stop. Loneliness. Absolute, devastating loneliness. The same loneliness she saw in mirrors. "Because we recognize each other," he said softly. "Because we are the same species, you and I. Predators in a world full of prey. Survivors surrounded by people who have never lost anything that mattered. I am not like you. No, you're worse." His smile was almost gentle. "You're pretending to be harmless. At least everyone knows what I am." The music swelled toward its conclusion. Seo Jun leaned close enough that his lips nearly brushed her ear. "I'm going to find out your secrets," he whispered. "Every single one. And when I do, you're going to have a choice. Run from me, or burn with me." The music stopped. The dance ended. Seo Jun stepped back, his mask falling perfectly back into place. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Okonkwo." His voice was perfectly formal. "I look forward to our next meeting." He turned and walked away. Chioma stood alone in the middle of the dance floor, her heart pounding and her hands shaking and her entire world tilting on its axis. Young-woo appeared at her side moments later. "Are you all right? What did he say to you?" "Nothing important." "Chioma, that man is dangerous. I know what he is." She forced a smile. "Don't worry about me. I can handle Park Seo Jun." But as she watched Seo Jun's retreating figure disappear into the crowd, she wasn't sure that was true anymore. She had come to soul-hunting monsters. She hadn't expected to find one who looked at her like she was the only real thing in a world full of shadows. She hadn't expected to understand him. She definitely hadn't expected to care. The night after the gala, Chioma's apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken. Nothing was obviously disturbed. But when she opened her door at 2 a.m., exhausted and still wearing her borrowed gown, she knew immediately that someone had been there. The air smelled different. Sandalwood and smoke. Her breath caught. Slowly, carefully, she closed the door behind her and surveyed the tiny space. Her few possessions were exactly where she had left them. Her clothes hung in the same order. Her books sat on the same shelf. But her mattress had been moved slightly. The leather journal was gone. Chioma's knees buckled. She caught herself against the wall, breathing through the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. He had her father's notes. He had the photograph. He had everything. Across Seoul, in the darkness of his penthouse, Seo Jun sat with the journal open on his desk. He had read it 3 times. The elegant handwriting of Chief Emmanuel Okonkwo detailed decades of business dealings, shipping routes, political connections, strategic alliances across Africa, Europe, and Asia. But more importantly, the journal detailed enemies, names, dates, transactions, and one name, circled multiple times in different colors of ink. Director Kim Sang-ho, Zenith Holdings, Korean Connection. The same Director Kim who had grabbed Chioma's wrist at the dinner. The same Director Kim who sat at Seo Jun's table and called himself an ally. Seo Jun leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Chioma Okonkwo wasn't just a woman hiding from a painful past. She was a hunter stalking the men who had killed her family. And those men, it seemed, were hiding in plain sight. In his own organization. The next morning, Chioma arrived at work to find a summons waiting. Chairman Park requests your presence in his office. Immediately, the office was on the 45th floor, a space so exclusive that most employees had never seen the elevator that accessed it. Chioma rode up in silence, her mind racing through possibilities. He could expose her. He could destroy her. He could have her arrested, deported, disappeared. She had no power here, no allies, no leverage. When the elevator doors opened, Secretary Han was waiting. "This way, Miss Okonkwo." He led her through a corridor of impossible luxury, marble floors, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a god's eye view of the city. The office at the end of the corridor was surprisingly simple. Clean lines, minimal furniture, a desk with nothing on it except a worn leather journal. Her father's journal. Seo Jun stood by the window, his back to her. The dragon and tiger tattoo was visible above his collar, stark against his skin. "Leave us," he said to Secretary Han. The door closed. Silence descended. "Your father was Chief Emmanuel Okonkwo," Seo Jun said. "The Lion of Lagos. One of the most powerful businessmen in West Africa. He controlled shipping routes that moved goods worth billions of dollars annually." Chioma said nothing. 3 years ago, his entire family was killed in what was officially ruled an accidental fire at their estate. His wife, his son, his daughter. Seo Jun turned from the window. Except the daughter wasn't there. She had been at a friend's house that night. When she returned and found the bodies. "Stop." Her voice cracked. Seo Jun paused. "I know what happened," Chioma said. "I lived it. I don't need you to narrate my nightmares." He moved toward her slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. She didn't. "According to your father's notes, the fire wasn't an accident. It was assassination, orchestrated by a coalition of business rivals who wanted control of his shipping routes." Seo Jun stopped an arm's length away. "And one of the names in that coalition belongs to a man who currently sits on my executive board." Chioma met his eyes. "Director Kim. Director Kim. He's the reason I came to Seoul. The reason I learned Korean. The reason I spent 3 years positioning myself to get close enough to..." She stopped. "To what?" "It doesn't matter now." Seo Jun reached out and lifted her chin with one finger, gently, so gently that she almost didn't feel it. "Yes, it does," he said. "It matters to me. What were you planning to do when you found him?" "What do you think?" "I think you were planning to destroy him. The question is whether you were planning to do it legally or otherwise." Chioma was quiet for a long moment. "My father was a good man," she finally said. "He believed in law, in justice, in doing things the right way. And they killed him for it. They killed my mother, who had never hurt anyone in her life. They killed my brother, who was 17 years old and wanted to be a doctor." Her voice hardened. "Legal justice is a luxury for people who haven't lost everything." Seo Jun studied her face. "You want revenge. I want justice. They're not the same thing. In my experience, they are." He dropped his hand from her chin. For a moment, he just looked at her, really looked, with all his walls down and all his masks removed. "Kim Sang-ho is a traitor," he said quietly. "He's been skimming money for my operations for years. He's been selling information to rival organizations. And apparently, he's been involved in the assassination of foreign businessmen and their families." A muscle flexed in his jaw. "Whatever you're planning, I want in." Chioma blinked. "What? You want Director Kim destroyed. So do I. We can help each other." "Why would you help me?" "Because he's my enemy too." Seo Jun paused. "And because I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For calling you just Waitress." His voice dropped. "You are clearly so much more than that. I should have seen it immediately. I was arrogant, and I was wrong, and I want to make it right." Chioma stared at him. This was not what she had expected. This was not the cold, ruthless mafia boss who controlled Seoul's underworld. This was something else entirely. Something human. Something vulnerable. Something dangerously appealing. "If we do this together," she said slowly, "there are rules." "Name them." "I get to be the one who takes him down. Publicly. I want him to know exactly who destroyed him and why." "Agreed." And when it's over, you let me walk away. No surveillance. No investigations. No games. Seo Jun was quiet for a moment. What if I don't want you to walk away? The question hung in the air between them. Chioma felt her heart stutter. That's not your choice to make. I know. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, see the pulse beating in his throat. But I'm asking anyway. When this is over, give me a chance. One real chance. To show you who I am, when I'm not being the monster everyone expects. I don't know if you can be anything else. Neither do I. His smile was rueful, almost sad. But for you, I'd like to try. Chioma looked at this man, this dangerous, powerful, broken man who had humiliated her publicly and then moved mountains to understand her. She should hate him. She didn't. One chance, she said. After Kim is destroyed. One chance to prove you're more than the monster. Seo Jun's eyes lit up with something she had never seen before. Hope. Deal. He extended his hand. She took it. And as their fingers intertwined, Chioma felt the last of her certainty crumble. She had come to soul-seeking vengeance. She had found something far more complicated. Something that might destroy her. Something that might save her. Something that, against all logic and reason, felt terrifyingly like love. Do you think power can ever replace genuine love? Let us know in the comments below. The following weeks became a strange dance of conspiracy and connection. Seo Jun and Chioma met in secret, sometimes in his penthouse, sometimes in safe houses scattered across Seoul, sometimes in the back corners of quiet restaurants where no one would think to look for the silent king. They planned Director Kim's destruction with methodical precision. Evidence needed to be gathered. Allies needed to be secured. Exit strategies needed to be prepared. But somewhere along the way, the planning sessions became something more. Tell me about your mother, Seo Jun said one evening, as they pored over financial documents in his penthouse. Chioma looked up surprised. Why? Because I want to know. I want to understand who made you. She was quiet for a moment. Then, her name was Adiz. It means father's daughter in Igbo, but she always laughed about that, because she was nothing like her father. He was hard, cold, traditional. She was. Chioma smiled. She was the warmest person I ever knew. She could walk into a room full of enemies and make them feel like they were the most important people in the world. You have that gift. I do not. You do. Seo Jun's voice was soft. The night of the gala, when you walked in wearing that dress, every eye in the room turned to you. Not because you were trying to be noticed. Because you were magnetic. I was terrified. You didn't show it. That's different. Is it? Chioma set down the papers she'd been reviewing. What about your mother? You've never mentioned her. Something flickered across Seo Jun's face. Pain, quickly suppressed. She died when I was 12. Cancer. My father was. He was not equipped to handle grief. He threw himself into work, into the organization, and expected me to do the same. He paused. I was running operations by the time I was 16, leading meetings by 18. My father died when I was 23, and I inherited everything. The money, the power, the enemies. Did you ever want a different life? Every day. The admission seemed to cost him. Every single day. But wanting doesn't change reality. I was born into this world. I don't know how to exist outside of it. Chioma reached across the table and touched his hand. Just briefly. Just lightly. But the contact sent electricity through both of them. Maybe you could learn, she said. Seo Jun turned his hand over, catching her fingers in his. Maybe we both could. Director Kim's downfall began slowly, then accelerated like an avalanche. Financial irregularities were discovered. Encrypted communications were leaked. Witnesses began coming forward. Through it all, Seo Jun provided resources while Chioma provided direction. She knew exactly which threads to pull, which names to invoke, which pressure points would cause maximum damage. She was brilliant. She was ruthless. She was magnificent. And Seo Jun, watching her work, felt something he had never expected to feel again. Admiration, respect, love. He didn't say it. He wasn't ready. But he felt it growing inside him like a fire that no amount of control could extinguish. 3 weeks into their campaign, Young-woo appeared at Chioma's apartment. She had been avoiding him since the gala, not returning calls, not accepting invitations, not giving him any encouragement. He deserved better than that. "I know something's happening," he said, standing in her doorway. "I know you're involved with Park Seo-joon somehow." "I'm not stupid, Chioma. I never thought you were." "Then explain it to me. Help me understand why you're getting close to one of the most dangerous men in Korea." "I can't explain it. Can't or won't." "Both." Young-woo's expression crumbled. "I care about you. I really care about you. And I'm terrified that you're going to get hurt. I can take care of myself. Can you?" Against someone like him. He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "Chioma, that man destroys everything he touches. I've seen it happen. I've watched him crush competitors, eliminate threats, remove obstacles without a flicker of remorse. Whatever game you think you're playing, it's not a game." "Then what is it?" Chioma met his eyes steadily. "It's justice." Young-woo stared at her for a long moment. "You're not who I thought you were," he finally said. "No, I'm not. The woman I was falling for, she was gentle, kind. She didn't have this coldness in her eyes. That woman was a mask." Chioma's voice was quiet. "I'm sorry if you believed in her." "So am I." He turned and walked away without looking back. Chioma closed the door and leaned against it, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. Young-woo deserved someone whole, someone real, someone who hadn't been broken and reassembled into a weapon. She wasn't that person. She might never be. 2 days later, everything fell apart. Chioma arrived at Seo-joon's penthouse for their regular planning session to find the space dark and empty. Not just empty, ransacked. Furniture overturned, papers scattered, glass shattered across the floor. And, in the middle of it all, written in what looked horrifyingly like blood, "We have him. Bring the journal or he dies." Chioma's blood ran cold. Director Kim had struck first. And now the man she had refused to admit she loved was in the hands of enemies who wanted her father's secrets badly enough to kill for them. She had 48 hours. She had no plan. She had nothing but rage and fear and the desperate certainty that she would burn down the entire city if that's what it took to get him back. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city and country in the comments. Chioma spent 12 hours tracking Director Kim's possible locations. She called in every favor she had accumulated over 3 years of careful networking. Former colleagues who had security access. Hotel staff who noticed details others missed. Street contacts who monitored movement in Seoul's darker corners. By morning, she had narrowed the possibilities to 3 locations. A warehouse in Incheon, an abandoned factory in Bucheon, a private estate in the mountains outside Seoul. She eliminated 2 of them by noon. The estate was the answer. Director Kim had been buying property under shell companies for years, building a private fortress for exactly this kind of situation. The journal detailed several of his purchases, and Chioma had been mapping them for months. But she couldn't assault an armed compound alone. She needed help. She needed an army. She needed someone who had resources she didn't. "Miss Okonkwo." Secretary Han's voice came through her phone at 3 p.m. "Secretary Han, I didn't expect. I'm calling because I have news. Certain members of the organization are concerned about the chairman's disappearance. They have been monitoring communications that suggest Director Kim has overplayed his hand. You know where Seo-joon is. I know many things. The question is whether I can trust you with them." Chioma's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm going to get him back, with or without your help. I believe you. That's why I'm calling." A pause. "There are 36 men loyal to the chairman. Men who would die before they saw Director Kim take control. If you can provide the location, the mountain estate, 30 kilometers north of the city." "I know it." Another pause. "Can you be ready to move in 4 hours?" "I'll be ready in 2. The assault on Director Kim's compound happened at 11 p.m. Chioma moved with the strike team like she had been born to warfare, which, in a way, she had. Growing up as the daughter of the Lion of Lagos meant learning things that other children never had to know. escape routes, defensive positions, how to read a situation and adapt in seconds. She was the first one through the door. The fighting was brutal and brief. Director Kim's security had been expecting an attack, but they hadn't been expecting the speed or the fury of the response. Within 20 minutes, the compound was secure. Within 30, Chioma was standing over Director Kim's bound and bleeding form. "You took something that belongs to me," she said softly. Director Kim laughed, a wet, rattling sound. "The Silent King? He doesn't belong to anyone. He's a monster just like me." "You're nothing alike." "Really? How many people has he killed? How many lives has he destroyed? You think a few weeks of playing house makes him a different person? He spat blood onto the floor. He's darkness, girl. Same as me. Same as all of us." "Maybe." Chioma crouched down to meet his eyes. "But you made a mistake that he would never make." "What's that?" "You hurt someone he cares about." She smiled coldly. "And you hurt someone I care about. Which means there's no one in the world who will save you from what comes next." Director Kim's confidence finally cracked. "The authorities will receive evidence of your crimes by morning. Financial records, communications, witness testimonies." She stood. "You'll spend the rest of your life in prison, Director Kim. And every day, you'll remember that the daughter of Emmanuel Okonkwo took everything from you. Wait, please." She walked away without looking back. Seo Jun was in the basement, beaten, bloodied, chained to a concrete pillar like an animal, but alive. Chioma fell to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she worked on his restraints. "Chioma." His voice was raspy, broken. "You came." "Of course I came." "You shouldn't have. It's dangerous." "Shut up." She got the chains loose and helped him sit up. "Just shut up and let me save you for once." He laughed, a painful rasping sound, and then pulled her into his arms. They held each other in the darkness of that basement, surrounded by violence and chaos and the aftermath of war. And for the first time in 3 years, Chioma felt safe. The helicopter extracted them at midnight. Seo Jun was taken directly to a private hospital, one of several that served the organization's needs without asking questions. Chioma stayed by his side through the initial examination, through the treatment of his injuries, through the long hours of unconsciousness that followed. When he finally woke, it was nearly dawn. "Chioma." She looked up from the chair beside his bed. "You should be resting. I need to tell you something." "It can wait." "No, it can't." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. "I've spent my entire life controlling everything. Every conversation, every relationship, every emotion. I built walls so high that even I couldn't see over them. But you," his voice cracked, "you burned through every one of them. And I don't want to rebuild." "Seo Jun, I love you." The words hung in the sterile hospital air like a benediction, like a curse, like the most beautiful and terrifying thing either of them had ever heard. "You don't have to say it back," he continued. "I know this is complicated. I know there's so much unresolved. But I needed you to know, whatever happens next, I love you. I have loved you since the moment you looked at me and refused to be afraid." Chioma felt tears sliding down her cheeks. 3 years of grief, 3 years of rage, 3 years of being alone. And now this man, this dangerous, broken, beautiful man, was offering her something she had convinced herself she would never have again. Love. Real love. The kind that survives fire. She started. The door burst open. Secretary Han stood there, his face ashen with fear. "Chairman, Miss Okonkwo, you need to see this immediately." He turned on the television mounted on the wall. The news was showing footage of police raids across Seoul. Zenith Holdings offices, Seo Jun's businesses, properties connected to the organization. And at the bottom of the screen, in bold letters, breaking. Park Seo Jun named as head of criminal organization. International arrest warrant issued. Chioma felt the blood drain from her face. Director Kim's final revenge. He had exposed everything. The evidence was out. The secret was broken. And the man she loved was about to become the most wanted person in South Korea. "We need to move," Secretary Han said urgently. "Now." before they locked down the hospital. Seo-jun looked at Chioma. His eyes held no fear, only determination, only love. "Will you run with me?" he asked. It was madness. It was suicide. It was the only answer she had ever been able to give. "Yes," she said. She took his hand, and together, they ran toward an uncertain future. What do you think will happen next? Will Seo-jun clear his name? Will Chioma finally get her justice? And can their love survive the fire that's about to consume them both? Please like, share, and subscribe. The first safe house lasted 3 days. A cramped apartment above a dry cleaner in Itaewon, its walls thin enough to hear every conversation in the street below. Seo-jun's injuries were still healing. 3 cracked ribs, a fractured wrist, contusions that painted his torso in shades of purple and black. But he refused to rest. From the moment they arrived, he was working, calling contacts on burner phones, coordinating with the few lieutenants who remained loyal, tracking the movements of enemies who smelled blood in the water. Chioma watched him pace the tiny room like a caged tiger, the dragon tattoo on his neck seeming to pulse with barely contained fury. "You need to sleep," she said on the second night. "I'll sleep when we're safe. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." He stopped pacing, turned to face her. In the dim light filtering through the grimy window, his face looked older, harder. The weight of an empire crumbling showed in every line. "Kim released everything," he said quietly. "Financial records, communications, names of every person connected to the organization. 20 years of careful separation between my legitimate businesses and the other side. Gone in a single night. There has to be a way to." "There isn't." His voice was flat, defeated. "The evidence is real. I am what they say I am. I've done what they say I've done. The only question now is whether I spend the rest of my life in prison or find a way to disappear." Chioma crossed the room and stood before him. "You forgot the third option." "What third option?" "Fight back." Her eyes met his with fierce determination. "Kim exposed you, yes. But you still have resources. You still have allies. And you have something he doesn't have, me." "Chioma, I didn't survive 3 years of hunting to watch everything fall apart now. Director Kim wants to destroy you? Fine. Let him try. But we're going to destroy him first. Publicly. Completely. In a way that makes everyone understand exactly what kind of monster he really is." Seo-jun stared at her. "You're not afraid," he said slowly. "I'm terrified." She took his hands in hers, careful of his injured wrist. "But I've been terrified before. It didn't stop me then. It won't stop me now." Something shifted in his expression. The defeat faded. In its place, hope. "How did I survive before you?" he murmured. "Badly, I imagine." He laughed, a real laugh, rusty from disuse, and pulled her into his arms. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other like the world wasn't falling apart around them. Because maybe, just maybe, it wasn't. The plan took shape over the following weeks. Director Kim had exposed Seo-jun's criminal connections, but he had made a critical error in doing so. He had also exposed his own. The evidence he'd released was comprehensive, too comprehensive. It included communications that implicated him in the very crimes he was using to condemn Seo-jun. He was sloppy, Chioma observed, studying the leaked documents on a laptop Secretary Han had provided. He was so eager to destroy you that he didn't properly sanitize the data. "He's desperate," Seo-jun agreed. "He knows that once I'm eliminated, he'll have to face the organization's internal justice. He's trying to burn everything down before that happens. Then we use his desperation against him." The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. First, isolate Kim from his remaining allies by exposing his betrayals within the organization. Seo-jun still commanded loyalty from enough lieutenants to make this effective. Men who had served his father, who remembered the old codes of honor that Kim had violated. Second, compile evidence of Kim's involvement in the Okonkwo family's assassination. This was Chioma's domain. Her father's journal had contained names and dates, but she needed more. She needed witnesses. She needed proof that would hold up in both Korean courts and international tribunals. third, coordinate a simultaneous release of this evidence through multiple channels: media, law enforcement, diplomatic contacts. Kim would have no time to suppress the truth before it spread everywhere. Finally, arrange for Kim to be taken into custody before he could flee the country or take his own life. He has to face justice, Chioma insisted. Real justice, not a quick death in some warehouse. Seo Jun studied her face. You've changed. What do you mean? When we first made our alliance, you wanted revenge. Blood for blood. Now you want a trial. A public reckoning. He paused. Why? Chioma was quiet for a long moment. Because my father would have wanted it this way, she finally said. He believed in systems, in processes, in the idea that civilization was built on rules, and that breaking those rules, even for good reasons, made us no better than the people who hurt us. She swallowed. I forgot that, for 3 years. I became something he wouldn't have recognized. Something my mother would have wept to see. And now I want to be someone they could be proud of. She met his eyes, even if that means letting go of the rage that kept me alive. Seo Jun reached out and cupped her face in his hands. You are remarkable, he said softly. Every day I spend with you, I discover new reasons to be in awe of who you are. I'm just trying to survive. No, you're trying to heal. There's a difference. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. And you're teaching me how to do the same. They moved safe houses 4 more times in the following weeks. Each location was more remote than the last. A fishing village on the coast, a farm in the countryside, a cabin in the mountains near the North Korean border. Seo Jun's network was fraying, but it held. Just barely. And throughout it all, they grew closer. Not physically. They maintained careful boundaries, both aware that the intensity of their circumstances could create false intimacy. But emotionally, they became something neither had experienced before. Partners. True partners. Chioma told him about her childhood in Lagos, about her father's booming laugh and her mother's quiet wisdom, about her brother Emeka, who had wanted to be a surgeon and spent hours practicing sutures on plantain peels, about the parties and the politics and the constant awareness that they were never quite safe, even at the height of their power. Seo Jun told her about growing up in the shadow of an empire he never asked for, about his mother's gentle hands and her belief that he could be more than what his father wanted, about the day she died and the way his father had looked at him with cold expectation. You are my legacy now. Act accordingly. About the first time he had ordered someone killed, about the weight that never lifted, about the nightmares that came every night without fail. I've done terrible things, he said one evening, as they sat on the porch of the mountain cabin watching the sun set. Things I can never undo. Things that would make you hate me if you knew the details. I know you have. And you still. She took his hand. We don't get to choose our starting points, Seo Jun. We only get to choose what we do next. You're choosing differently now. That matters. Does it? Does it really matter when so many people have suffered because of what I am? I don't know, she admitted. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe nothing ever balances out. But I know that giving up doesn't help anyone. I know that becoming a better person, even if it can't erase the past, at least means the future might be different. He squeezed her hand. My father used to say that power was the only thing that mattered. That love was weakness. That attachment was a chain that enemies could use against you. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were raw with emotion. He was wrong about so many things, but especially about that. What do you mean? You are not a weakness, Chioma. You are the strongest thing in my life. Caring about you doesn't make me vulnerable. It makes me want to be better, to be worthy of what you see in me. Chioma felt her heart crack open. I love you too, she whispered. The words she had been holding back for weeks. The admission she had been afraid to make. Seo Jun's breath caught. What did you say? I love you. She turned to face him fully. I didn't want to. I tried not to. You represent everything I should despise: power, violence, the kind of world that killed my family. But you're also kind, in ways you try to hide. And you're loyal. And you're struggling to be better, even when it would be easier to be worse. And She laughed softly, almost helplessly. I love you. Despite everything. Because of everything. Seo Jun pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. I will spend the rest of my life earning that, he said against her hair. However long or short that life turns out to be. Don't talk about dying. I'm not talking about dying. I'm talking about living. Really living. For the first time since I was 12 years old. They sat there in the fading light, holding each other, while the future stretched before them, uncertain and dangerous, and somehow full of possibility. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Young-woo. Chioma received the message through a secure channel that Secretary Han had established. A simple text that said, I have information about Director Kim. Critical. Can we meet? She stared at the message for a long time. It could be a trap, Seo Jun said, reading over her shoulder. It could be. Kim might be using him to get to us. That's possible too. But you want to go anyway. Chioma nodded slowly. Young-woo is a lot of things, but he's not a liar. If he says he has information, he has information. And if it's a trap, then we'll deal with it. She turned to face him. But I need to know what he knows. If there's even a chance it could help us take down Kim. Seo Jun was quiet for a moment. I'll come with you. If Kim's people see you. I'm not letting you walk into a potential trap alone. Seo Jun. This is not negotiable. His voice was firm but gentle. I spent weeks being tortured in Kim's basement because I wasn't careful enough. I'm not making that mistake again. Not when you're the one at risk. Chioma wanted to argue. She didn't. Because he was right, and because she found that she didn't want to face this alone. Fine, she said. But we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks. Agreed. They met Young-woo at a small cafe in Gangnam, neutral territory. Public enough to discourage violence, but private enough for sensitive conversation. Young-woo was already there when they arrived, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, his hands trembling slightly around his coffee cup. He looked up when they entered. His eyes widened when he saw Seo Jun. You brought him. I don't go anywhere alone right now, Chioma said, sliding into the booth across from him. Seo Jun remained standing, his body positioned to see both the door and the emergency exit. It's not a trap, Young-woo said tiredly. I know that's what you're thinking, but I didn't tell anyone about this meeting. I'm not working for Kim. Then why are we here? Chioma asked. Young-woo reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. Because 3 days ago, one of my security analysts flagged a suspicious transaction in our company servers. Someone had been using our infrastructure to launder money, not our money, but funds routed through our systems without authorization. Kim, Young-woo confirmed. He's been using my company as a front for his operations for years. I had no idea. The transactions were hidden in legitimate business activity. Impossible to detect unless you knew exactly what to look for. Chioma took the USB drive. What's on this? Everything. Financial records, communication logs, evidence of money laundering, bribery, and he swallowed. Evidence of payments made to assassins in Nigeria 3 years ago. Chioma's heart stopped. What did you say? I found records of payments to a security contractor based in Lagos. The dates match. Young-woo trailed off, his eyes filling with sympathy. The dates matched the night your family died. Chioma's hands were shaking. She looked at Seo Jun, who had gone very still. This is it, she whispered. This is what we need. There's more. Young-woo's voice was heavy. Kim isn't working alone. He has partners, powerful partners in the Korean government, in the business community, in international organizations. Taking him down won't be as simple as exposing his crimes. His allies will protect him. Unless we expose them too, Seo Jun said. Young-woo nodded. Unless you expose them too, which is why I'm offering to help. Chioma stared at him. Why? Because I was falling in love with you. The words came out raw, honest. And because, when I realized what was happening, what Kim had done to your family, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do something. I may not be the one who gets to be with you, but I can be the one who helps you get justice. The cafe was silent for a long moment. Then Chioma reached across the table and took Young-woo's hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for being who you are." Young-woo's smile was sad but genuine. "Be happy," he said. "Both of you. That's all I ask." The evidence on Young-woo's drive changed everything. For the first time since they'd gone into hiding, Seo-jun and Chioma weren't just reacting to Kim's moves. They were planning their own offensive. Secretary Han coordinated with contacts in law enforcement who had grown disillusioned with the corruption Kim's network represented. Chioma reached out to international journalists who specialized in exposing organized crime. Seo-jun leveraged his remaining business connections to ensure that when the story broke, it would be impossible to suppress. But the most important preparation was personal. "I need to make a video statement," Chioma said one evening. "Something that can be released with the other evidence. A human face to the story." Seo-jun looked up from the documents he was reviewing. "That's dangerous. It puts a target on your back." "There's already a target on my back. At least this way, I control the narrative." "What would you say?" Chioma had been thinking about this for days. "The truth. All of it. Who I am. Who my family was. What happened to them. Why I came to Korea. What I've learned." She paused. "And what I hope happens next. Which is justice. Real justice. Not revenge. Not violence. A trial. A conviction. The truth finally spoken in a place where everyone can hear it." Seo-jun was quiet for a long moment. "You'll be exposing yourself," he finally said. "Your hidden identity. Your activities over the past 3 years. People will know that you came here specifically to infiltrate organizations connected to your family's murder. I know. They might charge you with crimes too. Unauthorized investigation. Immigration fraud. Who knows what else. I know that too. And you're still willing to do it." Chioma met his eyes steadily. "I've been hiding for 3 years. Living as someone else. Pretending to be small and invisible and insignificant. And it worked. It kept me alive. It got me close to the answers I needed." She took a breath. "But I don't want to hide anymore. I want to be Chioma Okonkwo again. The real one. Whatever that costs." Seo-jun crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Then we do it together," he said. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. You'll be exposing yourself too. The things in that evidence. I know what's in that evidence. I know what it will mean for me." His jaw tightened. "But you taught me something, Chioma. You taught me that there's no real freedom in hiding. No real peace in running. The only way forward is through. Even if through means prison, even then." He lifted her hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles. "I'd rather face judgment as myself than spend the rest of my life as a ghost." They recorded the video statement on a gray afternoon, rain streaking down the windows of their latest safe house. Chioma sat before the camera, dressed simply in black, her mother's coral beads around her neck. She spoke for 43 minutes. She told the world who she was. She told them about her father, the Lion of Lagos, the man who had built an empire through hard work and strategic brilliance, and an unwavering commitment to ethical business practices. She told them about her mother, whose grace and wisdom had balanced her father's intensity. She told them about Emeka, 17 and brilliant and gone too soon. She told them about the night of the fire, about the phone call that had woken her at 3 a.m., about driving through the darkness to find her childhood home in flames, about the bodies, about the screaming, about the 3 years she had spent as a ghost, hunting the men responsible. And then she told them about Kim Sang-ho, about his involvement in the assassination, about his use of legitimate businesses as fronts for criminal activity, about his network of corrupt officials and compromised executives, about everything. When she finished, her face was wet with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. Seo-jun stepped forward and took her hands, pulling her up from the chair and into his arms. "You were perfect," he murmured against her hair. "Absolutely perfect." "I'm terrified." "So am I." "What happens now?" He pulled back to look at her face. "Now we send it out, and we wait for the world to respond. If you've been following Chioma's journey from the beginning, what do you hope happens to her?" Let us know in the comments. The evidence dropped at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Within hours, it was everywhere. News networks across Asia led with the story. International outlets picked it up by noon. Social media exploded with reactions, analysis, and demands for justice. Chioma's video statement went viral. Her face, the face she had hidden for 3 years, was suddenly recognizable to millions of people. The daughter of the Lion of Lagos. The woman who had survived assassination and emerged from hiding to demand accountability. Comments poured in from around the world. She's so brave. I can't imagine what she's been through. This is like a movie, except it's real. Justice for the Okonkwo family. Director Kim needs to face trial. No deals. No leniency. Where is she now? Is she safe? But not all the reactions were supportive. Kim's allies pushed back hard. They released statements questioning Chioma's credibility. They hired lawyers to threaten legal action against anyone who aired the accusations. They pressured news networks to provide balanced coverage that included their denials. And they searched for Seo Jun and Chioma with renewed intensity. They're closing in, Secretary Han reported on the third day. Kim's people have traced our communications. They know we're somewhere in the northern provinces. It's only a matter of time. How long? Seo Jun asked. Days. Maybe less. Then we need to move up the timeline. Move up what timeline? The evidence is out. The story is spreading. What else is there to do? Seo Jun's jaw tightened. The endgame. Kim himself. Director Kim Sang-ho was holed up in his mountain estate, the same compound where Seo Jun had been held captive weeks earlier. The evidence release had caught him off guard, but he had resources, money, men, political connections willing to help him escape prosecution in exchange for future favors. He was preparing to flee the country. He has a helicopter scheduled for tomorrow morning, Secretary Han reported. Private airfield. Flight plan filed for Shanghai, but our sources say he'll divert to somewhere without extradition treaties. If he gets out of the country, we lose him, Chioma said. Yes. Then we stop him before he reaches the helicopter. Seo Jun shook his head. It's too dangerous. He'll be surrounded by guards. We don't have enough men to. We don't need to fight our way in. Chioma's mind was racing. We just need to delay him. Keep him on Korean soil long enough for the authorities to act. The authorities are compromised. Kim's allies in law enforcement. Not all of them. She turned to Secretary Han. You said there were people in the system who wanted to see Kim face justice. People who had been waiting for evidence strong enough to move against him. There are, but they won't act without certainty that they'll be protected. Then we give them certainty. Chioma's eyes were bright with determination. We go public ourselves. Not just the evidence, us. Seo Jun and me. We surrender to authorities who aren't in Kim's pocket, and we offer to testify in person. If we're in custody, we're protected. And if we're testifying, the case against Kim becomes impossible to dismiss. Seo Jun stared at her. You want us to turn ourselves in. I want us to end this. Properly. The way it should be ended. She took his hands. I know what that means for you. I know the risk. But I also know that running forever isn't living. We said we'd face whatever comes together. This is what comes. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Seo Jun nodded. Together, then, together. They surrendered themselves at the Seoul Central Prosecutor's Office at 8 a.m. the following morning. The scene was chaos. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Crowds pressed against police barriers, some demanding justice for the Okonkwo family, others calling Seo Jun a criminal who deserved no mercy. Chioma walked through it all with her head held high. She was done hiding. She was done being afraid. Beside her, Seo Jun moved with quiet dignity. His face was calm, his posture composed. But she could feel the tension in his body, the awareness that he was walking into a system that had every reason to destroy him. The dragon and tiger tattoo was visible above his collar. Power, legacy, control, hidden pain, all of it exposed to the world. Park Seo Jun, the prosecutor said when they were brought into the formal intake room. "You are accused of multiple counts of—" "I know what I'm accused of," Seo-jun interrupted calmly. "I'm not here to deny my past. I'm here to testify against Kim Sang-ho. Whatever happens to me afterward is for the courts to decide." The prosecutor blinked. "You're cooperating?" "Fully." Seo-jun's gaze was steady. "I've done things that deserve punishment. I won't run from that. But Kim Sang-ho has done things that are far worse, and he's been doing them while pretending to be a legitimate businessman. That needs to end." Chioma stepped forward. "I'm Chioma Okonkwo, daughter of Chief Emmanuel Okonkwo. I have evidence linking Director Kim to my family's assassination and to numerous other crimes. I'm prepared to testify in court, in public, on the record." The prosecutor looked between them. "You understand that by coming here, by cooperating, you're exposing yourselves to prosecution as well." "We understand," Chioma said. "And you're doing it anyway?" Seo-jun and Chioma exchanged a glance. "Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty," Chioma said softly. "It's about truth, and the truth is too important to hide from." The arrest of Director Kim Sang-ho happened 12 hours later. He was apprehended at the private airfield, 50 meters from the helicopter that would have taken him to freedom. When the police surrounded him, he fought like a cornered animal, screaming about betrayal, about loyalty, about how everyone would pay for this humiliation. It was not dignified. It was not powerful. It was the end of a man who had built his life on cruelty and was finally facing the consequences. Chioma watched the news coverage from the holding cell, where she and Seo-jun were being kept. Kim's face was pale with terror. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained. His hands were cuffed behind his back. "It's over," Chioma whispered. Seo-jun reached through the bars of his adjacent cell and found her hand. "Not quite," he said. "There's still the trial. Still the sentencing. Still," he trailed off, "still your own case." "Yes." Chioma squeezed his fingers. "Whatever happens, I'll be there. Even if I go to prison for years. Even then. Even if the world decides I'm a monster who doesn't deserve redemption. The world can decide whatever it wants." She met his eyes through the bars. "I know who you are. I know who you're trying to become. That's what matters to me." Seo-jun's eyes glistened. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "What?" "That first night. When I called you just a waitress. When I dismissed you as insignificant." He shook his head. "You are the most significant person I have ever known. You changed everything. You saved me, not just from Kim, but for myself." "Seo-jun." "I'm sorry." The words came out rough, broken. "I'm sorry for humiliating you, for making you feel small, for every moment of cruelty and coldness. I was. You were hurt. You were hiding. You were doing what you've been taught to do." Chioma's voice was gentle. "I forgave you a long time ago. I need you to forgive yourself." He bowed his head. "I don't know if I can." "Then I'll keep reminding you until you believe it." The trial of Kim Sang-ho lasted 3 months. It was the biggest legal proceeding South Korea had seen in a generation. A sprawling case that exposed corruption at the highest levels of government and business. Politicians resigned. Executives were arrested. Entire organizations crumbled under the weight of evidence that the prosecution team assembled. Chioma testified for 4 days. She spoke about her family, about the night of the fire, about the 3 years she had spent hunting for truth. Her testimony was carried live on every major network, translated into dozens of languages, watched by millions of people around the world. By the time she finished, she was exhausted. By the time she finished, Director Kim's defense had collapsed. The verdict came on a cold December morning. Guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. When the sentence was announced, Chioma felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness. That would take longer. Not closure. She wasn't sure such a thing existed. But peace. The knowledge that the man who had destroyed her family would spend the rest of his life facing the consequences of his actions. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Seo-jun's own case was more complicated. His cooperation had earned him consideration, but his past couldn't be erased. The evidence against him was substantial. Years of criminal activity, even if the worst of it had been conducted by subordinates rather than his own hands. In the end, the court sentenced him to 8 years. It could have been worse. It could have been so much worse. Chioma was there when they read the sentence. She watched Seo-jun's face as he processed the reality of what was coming. 8 years behind bars. 8 years separated from the world. 8 years away from her. He didn't flinch. He didn't protest. He simply nodded, turned to look at her, and mouthed 2 words. Wait for me. The first year was the hardest. Chioma rebuilt her life from nothing. Again. With Kim's network dismantled and her father's name cleared, she finally had access to the resources that had been frozen for 3 years. The Okonkwo family fortune was substantial, held in trust by lawyers who had been waiting for a legitimate heir to claim it. She could have done anything, gone anywhere. Instead, she stayed in Seoul. She established a foundation in her family's name, the Okonkwo Foundation for Justice, dedicated to helping families affected by organized crime. She worked with victims. She funded legal advocacy. She built something meaningful from the ashes of her tragedy. And every week, without fail, she visited Seo-jun in prison. The visits were difficult. Seeing him in the gray uniform, behind the barriers, surrounded by guards, it was a constant reminder of everything they had lost and everything that remained uncertain. But they talked. For hours they talked. About the foundation, about his experience in prison, about philosophy and literature and what kind of future they might build if they ever got the chance. I've been reading, Seo-jun told her during one visit, 3 years into his sentence. Philosophy, ethics, trying to understand how I became what I was, trying to figure out how to become something different. What have you learned? That I was wrong about almost everything. He laughed ruefully. Power isn't the point. Control isn't safety. My father's way, the way I was raised, it was a lie, a trap disguised as wisdom. And now I want to build instead of destroy, create instead of take, love instead of fear. He met her eyes through the barrier. You taught me that. Every visit, every conversation, every moment you've stayed when you could have walked away. You taught me that there's another way to live. Chioma felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I love you, she said. I love you too. His voice was rough. And when you get out of here, we'll figure it out together, just like we always have. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city and country in the comments. We love seeing where our global family is tuning in from. 8 years. 8 years of waiting. 8 years of visits and letters and phone calls. 8 years of building a life that felt incomplete, like a house missing its most important room. And then, finally, a cold morning in March when Chioma stood outside the prison gates and watched the door open. Seo-jun walked out into the sunlight. He was older now, 46, silver threading through his dark hair, lines carved deeper around his eyes. The years had changed him, weathered him, shaped him into someone different from the cold Mafia boss who had once dismissed her as insignificant. But his eyes, those eyes that had seen through her from the very beginning, they were the same. He stopped 3 feet away from her. You waited, he said. I told you I would. 8 years. I would have waited longer. Something broke in his expression. The last of the walls, the final remnants of the man who had believed he didn't deserve love. He closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. They stood there in the cold March morning, holding each other while the world continued around them. 2 people who had found each other in the darkness. 2 people who had refused to let go. The weeks that followed were an adjustment. Seo-jun had to learn how to live in a world that had changed dramatically during his imprisonment. Technology had advanced. Social norms had shifted. The organization he had once led no longer existed, dismantled by authorities using the evidence he had helped provide. He had nothing. No money, no power, no influence. And for the first time in his life, he was genuinely happy. It's strange, he told Chioma one evening, as they walked along the Han River. The city sparkled around them, beautiful, and indifferent to their small human drama. I spent 40 years accumulating power, believing it was the only thing that mattered. And now that it's all gone." He shook his head. "I feel lighter. Lighter. Free." He took her hand. "For the first time ever, I don't have to be what someone else needs me to be. I don't have to carry an empire on my shoulders. I can just be." "What do you want to do with that freedom?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I want to marry you." Chioma's heart stuttered. "What?" "I know I have nothing to offer. No money, no status, no future that's certain. I know I'm a convicted criminal with a past that will follow me forever. But I love you, Chioma Okonkwo. I've loved you since you looked at me and refused to be afraid." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple ring, silver unadorned, clearly purchased with the meager funds he'd been given upon release. "Will you marry me?" Chioma looked at the ring. It was nothing like the jewelry she had grown up with. Nothing like what the daughter of the Lion of Lagos might have expected. It was perfect. "Yes," she said. Seo Jun's face transformed, all the tension and uncertainty and fear dissolving into pure, radiant joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he murmured against her hair. "I already know I won't." The wedding was small, 20 guests, a garden venue, simple decorations that focused on meaning rather than spectacle. Chioma wore traditional Nigerian wedding attire, a stunning coral-colored wrapper and blouse, her mother's beads around her neck, her hair styled in elaborate braids that took hours to complete. Seo Jun wore a simple Korean hanbok, dark blue with silver accents. The dragon and tiger tattoo was visible on his neck, but its meaning had changed. No longer a symbol of the power and violence that had defined his life. Now a reminder of how far he had come. Young Woo attended the ceremony. He had become improbably a friend to both of them, not a romantic rival, but someone who genuinely cared about their happiness. He brought a wedding gift, a charitable donation in their names to organizations supporting victims of organized crime in both Korea and Nigeria. "I told you to be happy," he said during the reception. "I'm glad you listened." Secretary Han was there too, now retired from the organization that no longer existed. He had become something like a father figure to Seo Jun during the prison years, visiting faithfully, providing updates on the outside world, offering the kind of unconditional support that Seo Jun had never received from his own father. "Your mother would have loved her," Han said quietly, watching Chioma laugh with the other guests. "She would have seen immediately what you see, a woman of substance, not just surface." Seo Jun's eyes glistened. "I think about my mother more now than I have in decades," he admitted. "About what she wanted for me. About the kind of man she hoped I would become. You became that man. Eventually. The long way around. The very long way. But you arrived." Han clapped him on the shoulder. "That's what matters." The ceremony itself was a blend of Nigerian and Korean traditions. They exchanged vows in both languages, Igbo and Korean, words of love and commitment that bridged two cultures and two histories. When the officiant pronounced them married, Chioma felt something shift inside her. The grief that had lived in her chest for over a decade didn't disappear, but it made room. Room for joy, room for hope, room for a future that wasn't defined by the past. 3 years after the wedding, the Okonkwo Foundation had become one of the most influential advocacy organizations in Asia. Chioma ran it with the same intelligence and determination that had kept her alive during her years in hiding. She built partnerships with governments, corporations, and NGOs around the world. She created programs that actually helped people, not just threw money at problems, but addressed root causes and provided sustainable support. Seo Jun worked beside her, not as the chairman, not as the power behind the scenes, just as a partner, handling logistics, building relationships, using the skills he had developed over decades of running an organization, but now for purposes that healed instead of harmed. It wasn't always easy. His past followed him everywhere. Some people refused to work with the foundation because of his involvement. Some journalists wrote articles questioning whether a convicted criminal should be allowed to work in charitable organizations. Some victims of organized crime couldn't see past what he represented. He accepted it all, not with the cold indifference of his former self, but with genuine understanding. "They're not wrong to be suspicious," he told Chioma after a particularly difficult meeting. "I hurt people, directly and indirectly. The fact that I've changed doesn't erase what I did. So what do you do with that? I keep working. I keep trying. I keep proving every day that the change is real." He paused. "And I accept that some people will never believe it. That's not for me to control." Chioma took his hand. "That's growth. It's trying." He smiled. "Just trying every day to be better than I was the day before." On a spring evening 5 years after their wedding, Chioma told Seo-jun that she was pregnant. He stared at her for a long moment. "You're sure?" "Very sure. We're going to be parents." "We are." He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the most precious thing in the universe. "I never thought I would have this," he said, his voice rough. "A family. A real family. I never thought I deserve it." "You do." "Do I?" "Yes." She pulled back to look at his face. "You've spent years proving that you can be more than what you were raised to be. You've helped thousands of people through the foundation. You've been a partner to me in every way that matters." She touched his cheek. "You deserve this. We deserve this." Their daughter was born on a cold November morning. They named her Adiz, after Chioma's mother. She had Chioma's dark eyes and Seo-jun's determined chin. She was perfect. When Seo-jun held his daughter for the first time, something in him finally fully healed. All the pain of his childhood, all the violence of his past, all the years of believing that love was weakness, gone, replaced by something new, something he had never allowed himself to feel before: hope. 10 years after the night Seo-jun had called her just a waitress, Chioma stood on the balcony of their home in Seoul. The city spread out beneath her, glittering with lights. In the room behind her, she could hear Seo-jun reading a bedtime story to Adiz, his deep voice gentle and warm, nothing like the cold tones he had once used to command empires. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fire that had destroyed her world, the years of hiding and hunting, the man who had humiliated her publicly and then moved heaven and earth to earn her forgiveness, the love that had grown from the ashes of 2 broken lives. She had lost so much: her parents, her brother, her childhood home, her innocence. But she had also gained a partner who saw her, really saw her, and loved what he found. A daughter who carried the names and spirits of ancestors from 2 continents. A purpose that made every day meaningful. A home, not a house, a home. The door behind her slid open. Seo-jun joined her on the balcony, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "She's asleep," he said softly. "Good. What are you thinking about?" "The night we met." "Ah." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "The night I was the biggest fool in Seoul. You were pretty terrible." "I really was." He turned her to face him. "I'm sorry. I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I'll say it 1,000 more. I'm sorry for every moment of pain I cause you." "I know." She touched his face. "And I forgave you a long time ago." "Why?" "Because you showed me who you really were. The man beneath the mask. The person you were afraid to let anyone see." She smiled. "And because that person was worth loving." Seo-jun leaned his forehead against hers. "I was wrong about you," he said softly. "That first night, when I called you just waitress. I remember. You were never just anything. You are, the most extraordinary person I have ever known. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that you gave me a chance to see that." Chioma kissed him gently. "Let's go inside," she said. "It's getting cold." "In a minute." He held her close. "I just want to stay here, in this moment, where everything is exactly as it should be." She leaned into him. 2 people who had found each other in darkness. 2 people who had built something beautiful from the ashes. 2 people who had finally, against all odds, come home. 20 years later, Adiz Park-okonkwo stood before a crowd of international delegates at the United Nations. She was 21 years old, beautiful, brilliant, and fierce in the way that both her parents had always been. When my mother was my age, she said, her voice carrying across the hall, her entire family was murdered by people who valued profit over human life. She could have let that tragedy destroy her. Instead, she used it to fuel a lifetime of advocacy and healing. In the audience, Chioma and Seo Jun sat side by side. His hair was fully gray now. Her face was lined with years of laughter and struggle. But their hands were intertwined, as they had been for decades. My father spent years as someone the world feared, Adiz continued. He did things he regretted. But he also spent decades proving that people can change. That redemption is possible. That love is stronger than fear. She paused, looking directly at her parents. They taught me that justice isn't about revenge. That power isn't about domination. That real strength comes from using whatever you have, whatever you've been through, to make the world better for the people who come after you. Chioma felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Seo Jun squeezed her hand. The Okonkwo Park Foundation has helped thousands of families over the past 15 years, Adi said. Families like mine could have been. Families who lost everything to violence and greed, but refused to let that be the end of their story. She smiled, her mother's smile warm and strong. Today, I'm announcing the expansion of our work into 5 new countries. We're building something that will outlast any of us. A legacy of healing. A legacy of hope. A legacy that proves love always wins. The applause was thunderous, but Chioma barely heard it. She was looking at Seo Jun, this man who had called her just a waitress in a moment of arrogant cruelty, and who had spent decades proving that he could be so much more. I love you, she said softly under the sound of the applause. I love you too, he said. Every day, more than I ever thought possible. They had been broken. They had been lost. They had found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful from the ashes. And their love, tested by fire, refined by time, proven over decades of struggle and joy, would endure forever. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything to us. Until next time.